Israeli forces have carried out attacks on refugee camps in cities across the occupied West Bank. The military targeted the al-Ein camp on Wednesday. Thousands of Palestinians have been forced to leave their homes in the past 2 months. Aksel Zaimovic reports.
Israeli military vehicles raid al-Ein refugee camp. Armored vehicles move between homes, launching a door-to-door assault. Within hours, a forced evacuation grips the community.
They
raided the camp at midnight, killing one man and arresting another. By morning, the eviction was underway. They enter homes and force people out. No eviction order, no time to gather belongings, just an order to leave.
Families try to collect what few possessions they can carry. An elderly woman collapses, overwhelmed by stress. Emergency medical teams rush to her aid. Scenes of displacement all too familiar in the decades-long Israeli occupation.
They went house by house, destroying what they found. Women were allowed to leave while they gathered all males, young, old, and boys. Some men were beaten in front of their mothers. This wounded us deeply, and then we began evacuating the camp.
Dozens of families were forced from their homes at gunpoint. Israeli forces convert houses into military posts for what is believed to be a military advantage. Odeh Zamil feared this moment would come.
I'm relocating my belongings to my daughter's house. If they force us out tonight, we'll be prepared rather than caught off guard.
Children drag suitcases through streets they've been forced to abandon. Some residents manage to save cherished pets in the rush to leave. Families pile into vehicles, uncertain of their destination. Others depart on foot, looking back at the camp they've long called home. Israeli forces also moved to demolish more than 60 additional Palestinian homes in the Jenin refugee camp. It's the largest single-location demolition order in at least 2 decades. Nearly 2 months into their assault in the camp, residents say the Israeli army forced many to flee the area.
Unfortunately, Israel is using ethnic cleansing. More than 40,000 people were expelled from their homes in the last few weeks in the West Bank. This is unbelievable number. And Israel is continuing to destroy all the Palestinian refugee camps in order to end the Palestinian refugee issue.
Palestinians see these Israeli raids as part of a campaign to erase their presence from their lands. What remains clear, their fear of permanent exile deepens with each passing day. Aksel Zaimovic, Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera's Nour Odeh joins us from Amman with more on the reaction in Israel. You're there, Nour, because the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority have banned Al Jazeera from reporting inside Israel and inside the occupied West Bank. Just want to start with what's been happening in the West Bank overnight.
Well, Cyril, in the West Bank, more of the same, more displacement, more Israeli raids into refugee camps. And as the report was saying, there has been a systematic campaign to destroy refugee camps in Jenin and Tulkarem. Now it's moved on to al-Ein, a refugee camp in Nablus, but there were also raids in Askar refugee camp nearby. There were raids in villages all around Ramallah as well, and this is accompanied, of course, by the detention, the mass detention of dozens of Palestinians. They are usually detained, interrogated most of the time in community centers, beaten often, as we've been hearing testimony, and then released. But what it does is create this atmosphere, Cyril, that when the night comes, everybody in the occupied West Bank is almost necessarily prepared that they may be next, that there may be a forced evacuation order issued in their neighborhood, that their refugee camp would be the one to suffer that onslaught of mass destruction as they watch their homes basically turn into rubble over days and weeks.
And Nour, look, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is threatening to escalate attacks on Palestinian homes across the occupied West Bank. This is what he said after visiting troops in the territory.
I am here, in the undercover unit in Judea and Samaria, which is the tip of our spear that penetrates and throws the terrorist enemy off balance. Simply, they're doing sacred work for the state of Israel. Because while we are waging a fierce war against Hamas and the Gaza Strip, we are aware of the possibility of a larger and stronger front emerging here in Judea and Samaria. Therefore, the work of the border police, the Israel police, and the Israeli military, in cooperation with these forces and our special units, is yielding many results for the security of Israel's citizens.
Nour, we're aware of the possibility of a larger and longer front opening. Help us read this statement. Is this part of the usual rhetoric we hear from the Israeli government, or are they signaling a further ramping up of their military operations?
They're dead serious, Sarah. And in fact, the Israeli Minister of Defense has already announced that this military campaign that includes the use of tanks in the occupied West Bank, that changes the topography and geography of refugee camps in the West Bank to accommodate those tanks, this campaign will last until the end of 2025. But in addition to all of that, and I think it's important to remind our viewers that, first of all, the presence of Israel in the occupied West Bank has been deemed illegal. So the fact that they're working in the occupied West Bank as if it were Israel is already problematic. But in addition to all of that, you have Israeli settler leaders announcing coalitions, talking about imposing sovereignty in the occupied West Bank. And that takes us back to annexation, which is at the heart of the government program. There have been a lot of steps taken, a lot of legislation and orders taken under the fog of war, Cyril, so they don't get a lot of attention. But basically appropriating thousands of acres of Palestinian land, issuing demolition orders, taking over land, destroying Palestinian roads, connecting Palestinian villages in the occupied West Bank, all to basically serve that strategic goal of annexation, which is why the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territory in the United Nations has warned that there is a threat of mass ethnic cleansing in the occupied West Bank because of these actions, because they're taken under the fog of war and they're not catching as much attention and as much action from the international community as she would like to see.
Nour Odeh, reporting from Amman, Jordan. Thank you very much.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.